Hello, welcome to Open Dialogue. I'm Noel T. Manning II. I got to tell you, really excited to have Ian Seabrook, cinematographer, who's really known for his underwater cinematography work right here today, talking with us on Open Dialogue. His work is pretty deep and vast. He's been involved in film going back to the early 90s. Some of the filmmakers he's worked with over the course of his career include everybody from Tom Cruise to Zack Snyder, to Will Smith, to many, many others. Now you can find some of his work in theaters, Jungle Cruise, Old, and speaking of Zack Snyder, you can also find his work on Army of the Dead. Let's dive in and spend some time talking to Ian Seabrook about his work in film, television, and just his love of the industry. Hello, welcome to Open Dialogue and Meet Me at the Movies right here on C19 TV and WGWG, and also through my YouTube channel. We appreciate you spending time with us as we talk movies in various aspects, from reviews to interviews and hot topics. And we're really happy today to have Ian Seabrook, a cinematographer that your body of work is pretty amazing, and it's pretty vast. Everything from television to feature films to documentary work as well. Is there anything that you don't do as it relates to cinematography, Ian Seabrook?
Maybe industrial videos. I don't know.
Well, I appreciate you spending time with us. And as we're recording this show, some of your work can be seen on the big screen with Emily Blunt and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Jungle Cruise, Disney's Jungle Cruise, but before we talk about that, I really want to get some background to when you discovered, how did you discover that this was something you wanted to do? That's the first question. So I'll let you answer that. And then I'm going to do a follow-up on that.
Okay. I was, I've been interested in the underwater world, realm, whatever you want to call it, from a pretty young age. I used to watch a lot of Disney nature documentaries. And then the requisite James Bond, Thunderball, The Deep, Jaws, anything that had water. I was most interested, I think the element in Jaws I was most interested in was when Hooper went down into the cage. And so, National Geographic issues of the magazine, looking at the photography, I obviously developed an interest in still photography, and played around in the dark room and all that kind of stuff. And then, went to Australia, and there was a place that was renting little still camera housings for cameras. And I said, oh, I want to check that out. So I went down, did that, and took some photos, and I still have the slides.
Wow.
It's mostly dead coral, but it doesn't, and I took a selfie of myself, and I thought, no, is that the first underwater selfie? I don't know, probably not, but anyway. So it's pretty funny to see what I was wearing back then too, because I think the rental wetsuits were like pink and neon orange or something, and it's like colors that are not in my wardrobe at all. So anyway, and so came to the point where you gotta figure out what you want to do with your life, and my mom had just passed away. I was traveling around the South Pacific for a couple of years. I'd saved up a bunch of money from the jobs that I'd done, and I was at a bit of a precipice, thinking, I was in New Zealand, actually, on the North Island of New Zealand, at a place called Cape Reinga. And I just thought, okay, we got to figure this out. So I said, okay, well, I love photography and I love diving, so I'm going to put the two of them together. There's no school, there was no formal training. There was a Brooks Institute of Photography, I think, in California at the time, but I probably didn't have the money to go there. So basically, just applied myself and kept saved up enough money and bought a Nikon S5 still camera, which is underwater Nikon, and just stayed obsessed with it. And eventually, got in as a camera assistant and started working with underwater motion picture housings as an assistant, and then that developed into shooting. And I think my photographic background with exposure and focus and so on and so forth definitely helped the transition from shooting stills to cinematography. And then, of course, a lot of it now is all digital. But you know, my primary training was all in film. So it's been the lifelong obsession that I've just stayed with. And like any discipline, if you're a musician or whatever, just staying with it. And if once you realize it's not serving you, then you just go, I'm moving on to something else. But for me right now, it's still very much still exciting. So.
Well, I lived in the Bahamas back in 1987, and my uncle was a huge photography enthusiast and also underwater. He did a lot of snorkeling. And so you were talking about those housings, and he would buy housings. And I remember the first time I went snorkeling with him, it was the first time I had actually been underwater where I could actually see things. And in the Bahamas, just so crystal clear anyway. I was truly blown away at that other world that was there all the time that I'd never had a chance to actually see. And I remember every week I had a day off, and I would just go snorkeling and take pictures all the time, because it just blew me away what I was able to experience up close and personal in ways that I had only seen in things like National Geographic before. It was an eye-opening experience for me in a lot of ways.
For sure. When you are in the water with marine mammals, I've been in the water with a lot of sharks. I'm in the water with some killer whales, pygmy killer whales, other kinds of whales, pilot whales. And when you're that close to them and you see them looking at you, or what you appear to think is that them looking at you, it's a you know, I mean, it's an otherworldly experience, you know. I mean, when I was diving amongst a school of 170 hammerhead sharks, you can't even speak when you get out of the water. They're like, hey, how was the dive? And you're just like, good, you know. So again, you know.
For me, it was barracuda. We saw quite a few barracuda, and I remember the first time I saw one of those, and my uncle pretty much mouthed what it was. I was like, do I need to run? He's like, no, it's okay. It's all right. You know, it's all right. And once you knew, you know, once you understand how to interact in their world, it's okay. It's all right.
It is their world. You're the visitor. It's once you, with barracuda, I think I was photographing something. It might have been in Honduras or someplace like that. And the sun, the glint hitting my watch was like, you know, I was doing this, and then the sun hitting my watch created this glint that the barracudas were like,
wow.
And they were totally attracted to it. So I'm like, oh, okay, great. I got a couple shots, and then they kept following me. I thought, oh, this is not good. So what should I do? Take the watch off or do something? I don't know. Eventually they went away, but I was like, oh, it's a great photo op. And then I'm like, okay, I want it to stop now, but you know, it's like, no, we're still going to follow you.
Exactly. You know, they're reminding you, it's our world. It's our world.
You're the visitor. Totally.
Yes. There was a film that was shot. I'm in North Carolina is where I am. And there was a film that was shot here back in the late 80s. It was called The Abyss. And it was a major underwater taking in a lot of different ways. And Earl Owensby, who is an independent filmmaker, it was his studio. And Earl and I, we've known each other for years, and he's told me a billion stories about that crazy shoot. And so when I think about underwater and how things can go wrong, but ultimately it ends up being okay, that's a film that I go back to.
I knew a few friends who worked on that production, and trying to get them to talk about it over the years has been difficult. I typically don't give up. So it's sort of like, you know, the one story I got finally was that because they were shooting 6-day weeks and they were on nights, they didn't have a lot of downtime. What are you going to do on the Sunday? You're probably going to do your laundry. Not that the guys in the tanker had much laundry. It's basically wetsuits, and, you know,
right.
Whatever you were wearing when you were going home. So as they were driving back to the hotel, and there's no traffic on the road, some of the guys in the effects department, special effects department, would pull up adjacent to the other car. Everybody had their windows down because it was hot, and they were trying to not fall asleep at the wheel, and they would shoot firecrackers and little mini rocket launchers through each other's cars just to wake them up. It was that kind of, you know, like, oh, okay. So, but that film is still, I mean, I saw it when I was in Australia, when I was living there. And then also I saw the remastered or the director's cut when it was released in the theaters years ago in Santa Monica. But yeah, it's obviously a major influential film. I always had my cut of it, which is where, you know, Ed Harris disconnects the bomb, and then he just sees the glowing lights coming towards him, and that's where I would end the film.
Yeah.
I would never have him go into any of that,
Yeah.
which is like, you know, everyone's like, what's happening with this film? Why is this
Yeah.
like ET now, right? So,
Yeah.
but it's this taut thriller. It's this taut, like James Cameron was, he was very good at close quartered, taut sort of action, and investing enough time in the characters that you actually cared about them.
Yeah.
And I still, you know, I'll still watch that film. Even the documentary that was made on the making of
Yes.
the film is still
Wow.
fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And talent beyond all extremes. I know many people who have gone on to do other things. Some people aren't in the film industry anymore, but certainly still a major influence, that film. Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful work.
Yeah, and very ambitious, and really any photography that takes place outside of the CGI world now, when you are within elements that, again, you don't have complete control over, that's a whole different animal. Talk about some of the challenges that you face daily when you are doing underwater photography, especially cinematography.
Yeah, I mean, a large portion of what any underwater cinematographer is going to have to do is, it's in the film industry anyways, at least you're going to have to work with blue screen, green screen, composite screens, and I've done my fair share of it. And so you're either imagining what the element is going to be behind, and essentially it's, you know, it's a guy or a character swimming down or doing things, and then they're just going to replace the background. When we did Man of Steel, for example, there are whales in the background, there's an oil rig on fire. All of it was done against a green screen, so we had no idea what the animators were going to do. They had a rough idea, but then of course it gets, you know, one time they had the whale in, then they took the whale out, and then it was like, what do we do? Or we'll shoot fire elements, and then they'll shrink them down, shrink the character down, and then they'll create a larger environment. And so you really don't know.
Yeah.
And again, this stuff goes through several different tests at enormous expense. Like, yeah, what happens if we shrink them down and make them smaller? Or what happens if we don't do that? They're always going to experiment. So the main thing to do on my end is to make sure that the green screen, blue screen, whatever color they want to use, is lit evenly. And then that allows the VisFX department to place in whatever they want, whatever lighting situation they need to do. So yeah, blue screen was we used blue screen on Jungle Cruise. We used it on Old for a small little piece.
Yeah.
Old was photographed with motion picture film, which is, again, as I was saying earlier, how I got my start, which I, believe it or not, prefer to work in that medium than digital, but everything is digital. The digital is, I guess it's easier, but it also, in that you can see the results. You don't need to wait for the laboratory processing, but it has its own, within its realm, it still has its difficulties as well. So, reduced depth of field, and, just the camera. I think when the digital cameras first came out, the tendency was just to keep them running. The runtime with obviously with motion picture film, you've got, under 4 minute burn time or an under 10 minute burn time. You're never going to have 1,000-foot mag on a camera underwater, except on Jaws, which is the housing for Jaws is sitting in Panavision in Woodland Hills in California, and it's an inverted Mitchell camera, which means the magazine's on the bottom, and the lens is here and the magazine's on the bottom, so it's upside down. You can Google it, you'll find that the images for it everywhere. But it's enormous. They used ballasts float ballasts to ballast the camera. And I looked through it, and I was like, how is any of the photography in Jaws in focus? I was like, he could barely see. Like, anyway, I don't know how they did it, but so again, huge respect for that production as well. I know that a large portion of that was because the shark didn't work. Which is what made the film better, right? So
but,
Sure, go ahead.
Currently you've got Jungle Cruise, you've got Old, also Army of the Dead. That's all exhibiting work that you've been a part of. It seems like you are always busy doing something. I've looked back over the the bulk of your career for the past few decades, and it's just amazing how many things you have per year. How do you decide on what to take and what not to take? I mean, how does that work for you?
Some years you know what you're going to be doing within the calendar year, and it all aligns.
Yeah.
But that, you know, it changes like the weather, and other times the jobs overlap, or they push, or they cancel, or, you know, that it's really luck of the draw, I suppose. I mean, I think I had, like, in 2020 when the pandemic hit, a lot of people weren't working, and then I had something booked, but it wasn't until, like, you know, September. So I was over in the UK for a few months, and then coincidentally, just not close to that end of the filming, I got contacted about another job. Just the timing completely worked out. I wasn't able to do that job, but then the other production that I was on pushed. So then that opened that window up. So sometimes it works out that way. But scheduling it is, sometimes they know they have some water work or second unit or whatever, but they, you know, they'll get underway and they'll kind of push it till the end. And sometimes, you know, it's at the end of the schedule when the productions run out of money and time, and they're like, we got to do this really fast. And you're like, well, yeah, so, everything needs its time. It's not just a rush job and jump in and, like, pull the trigger.
Right.
So,
right.
You know, but,
well,
yeah.
Looking at those three projects, Army of the Dead, Old, and Jungle Cruise, what are the differences that you encountered on those, and things that you truly remember as standout scenes or moments for you in your work on them?
Well, Army of the Dead, I shot the second unit on that with Damon Caro, who is Zack Snyder's second unit director. And I've worked with Zack on, I think it was my third or fourth film working with Zack. Zack is a unique individual, and he's one of a select few people that I would, you know, really go the extra mile for. So that basically we did a lot of the vault fight. We did there's a sequence that we did that introduced the character of Zeus, and that got cut out of the film. So it was this enormous sequence that, you know, we took a lot of time with, and I was like, where is that sequence? It's cut out of the film. So, and I just said, oh, it must have been a time thing, because I think at the moment it's still 2 hours and 38 minutes.
Yeah.
That might have been like the 3-hour director's cut of that. Was
yeah.
So, and then Jungle Cruise was just, you know, meeting with, I flew from, I was in Hawaii vacationing with my wife. I hadn't seen her in 6 months or so. And then, you know, not even a few days into it, it was like, oh, can you come to Atlanta for our meeting? So I was like, sorry, honey, I gotta go. So went and met with Jama and Doug Merrifield, the producer, and Fabio, the DP, and a few other people. And basically, I met them before call time, and then they had to go off and shoot. And then I walked through the sets with the art department, talking about the sets, which at that point had not been constructed, or they were in the early stages of construction. So the prep for that was sizable. And you know, when we got to Atlanta and shot for about a week and a half or so, we shot in 2 tanks. There was an exterior tank for the boat work when Emily and Dwayne jumped from the L'Aquila into the water. Yeah. And then we transferred the rest of it into an interior tank inside one of the stages at Blackhall in Atlanta. And then Old was done after I had finished up work on the Thai Cave Rescue picture in the UK with the directors who did Free Solo, who won the Oscar for Free Solo. That's Chai Besser-Halle and Jimmy Chin, who are wonderful human beings.
Yes.
And so, but at the time, due to the administration, I wasn't able to fly in from the UK into the United States. So without a 14-day mandated quarantine. So it wasn't gonna work for the time frame involved. So I had to fly from the UK to Toronto, Canada to Panama City, and then Panama City over to the Dominican. That way I skirted around the US airspace. And so I was in the air for about 32 hours of travel by the time I arrived. So, which, you know, it's not that dissimilar from when we went to Bora Bora to do Batman versus Superman with Zack again. I think the travel there, it was probably 29 hours by the time I got to Bora Bora, and then we had to, you know, I was like, okay, grab some breakfast and out the door and off to a survey. So we had to go survey the dive sites, and
Yeah.
you know, I was like zinging at that point, you know. But yeah, so of course, as soon as you sit down, you're like, your body just shuts down. But
Right.
but old was in the Dominican Republic, and so I had worked with Knight prior on a picture called Glass, and also with his cinematographer Mike Jalakis, who I've done 3 or 4 jobs with now. Really stand-up guy. And so old again, it was at the end of the production. It was the last thing that we did, and that was shot at the Dominican Republic, the tank that they have down there from Pinewood Studios. So I went from Pinewood Studios in the UK to Pinewood Studios in the Dominican, and Neiman Marshall had production designed this entire tunnel set that the actors ended up going through on Old, and he did a fantastic job. So basically, as soon as I landed, it was full on prep work and all that stuff, and I think I was there for same duration, like a week and a half or so, and and then we got all that stuff done, and you know, Knight just said, "We'll do it again, brother," and that was that. So
awesome.
Out of there, and you know, off to something else. But
do you remember the moment, thinking back over the course of your career, that you realized that this was something that not only you were good at, but it was something that you wanted to do, and that you knew, hey, I can make a living at this, and the kind of living that I want?
I mean, I think the first job I did was a horror movie. The first film I shot as a DP was a horror movie. It was a HELLRAISER movie. And I had the desire to be a cinematographer, but oftentimes you think, well, you know, I could stay what I'm doing and I'll just be an assistant or what have you. I mean, I was an assistant on Insomnia with Al Pacino and Robin Williams for Chris Nolan. That was his second film, his first big studio picture. But, you know, I think with any, you know, I stayed long enough at each position in the camera department that I felt I had amassed enough knowledge to move further. So there are also other people who don't want to do that. They want to just, you know, oh, I want to be a DP and I'm just going to start shooting stuff, and whether you fail or not. I think, to me, putting the time in is from as far as my perspective is concerned, putting the time in is the most important thing to do, because I think you understand each step in the process, as opposed to, I certainly worked for cameramen who have not done that, and they've gone straight from film school to shooting. And then when you get around all that equipment, they don't really understand it's, you know, the philosophy behind a lot of it, and how to execute the shots with the equipment. And so you're relying on crew members that have done it for years to save your ass. And I never wanted to be one of those people. I witnessed it too many times. I just thought I really want to know what I'm doing, and I want to have the confidence to undertake this stuff when someone says, hey, we need to do this, and you can come in and do it without going, oh yeah, I can do it, then not really knowing what you're doing. So, I mean, every job has different challenges for sure, but you know, I just think it's very helpful to have a journeyman sort of process with this. I think that you can take that attitude to anything in life, really.
Yeah. Were there any mentors that you had in this school of filmmaking, by being there and doing it, that you either just learned from, that you said, wow, I want to make sure that I'm someone like that? Or was there something that someone said to you along the way and you said, I'm not going to forget that?
Well, certainly the work of Lamar Boren on Thunderball and a lot of the James Bond films, For Your Eyes Only and Spy Who Loved Me. He passed away before I was ever in the film industry, but his work was so influential that it still is. You know, I still put Thunderball on, still marvel at it, and so there's a lot of influences. You know, Howard Hall is a natural history filmmaker. He did the first IMAX 3D underwater film called Into the Deep. And I never worked with Howard. I did dive with him at Cocos Island in Costa Rica with all the hammerhead sharks.
Wow.
And so watching him work was very influential, as well as, I mean, I find him to be the most artistic of any of the, I mean, underwater documentaries is like, okay, the shot of a fish going by or a shark or whatever, but to actually have a good sense of composition, he separates himself from many others, and still does to this day. A lot of the Blue Planet, a lot of the BBC natural history films that have come out of late, I mean, they've really changed the way a lot of those films look. They look spectacular, and the cameramen that they have working on those films are spectacular. But as far as my own personal influences, I mean, I trained under Pete Romano, who runs Hydroflex, and he was very helpful, and we worked together quite well when I was an assistant. Mike Ferris is another guy who he shot some underwater work. He did The Game with David Fincher. He was also another strong influence. But you know, I mean, ultimately, you know, my favorite cinematographer of all time was Robbie Mueller, who shot for Wim Wenders and Alex Cox and William Friedkin on To Live and Die in LA. And you know, he never did anything underwater, but just his edict, his sort of, you know, ethos regarding photography and his use of natural light. And so, you know, in the four corners of the frame, before you roll on anything, before I roll the camera on anything, I have all these influences, you know, from Robbie Mueller to Andrew Wyeth to Alex Colville, artist, to James Noctway, who's a combat photographer. Music, art, anything, it's all swirling in your head. And then when these influence the decisions that you make when you are framing or composing or lighting or what have you. It's not just, oh, I like that guy's work in that movie, I'm going to copy it. It's, you know, it's, these influences have stayed with me for a very long time. So, you know, and new influences are, you know, the new influences of the BBC crews that are shooting those films. I mean, they're out there for months. I mean, I don't do that kind of work, but I'd certainly love to work on some of that. But I mean, I've done a few documentaries, but some of the footage of whales and stuff that these guys have got, it's just amazing, you know. So I take influences from, you know, photography, motion pictures, all different art forms, really. So.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about Free Solo, and I remember watching that when it first came out. I was serving on a documentary selection committee, and that film popped up, and immediately I was like, yeah, this is one that the bigger the screen, the better the experience. And it won many awards that year, and rightfully so. But I was just blown away by what they were able to create and bring to life. Matter of fact, on my desktop, you can't see it, but I've got images from that movie saved on both of my desktops, because the imagery was just so incredible. And to realize, you know, to me, the documentary of the making of that documentary is as fascinating as the documentary itself when you get a chance to look behind the scenes. Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And Bob Eisenhart, who is the editor on that picture, is the editor I worked quite closely with on the Thai Cave Rescue picture. So I mean, I saw a few cuts of it, and, you know, I knew what we had to augment. But I mean, I know that they crafted Free Solo for several months with Bob. You know, you got to continue to drive the story, and it's always story driven. I mean, right. You know, everything that you're bringing in with, you can use old or Jungle Cruise. It's like, as an example, the sequences that I contributed to those films are part of the story. Oftentimes I'm thinking, you know, oh, I hope the film didn't get cut out. I still haven't seen Jungle Cruise. I'm going to go see it today, but oftentimes which makes it kind of weird when I'm talking about it with people, like, I don't know if that's in the movie anymore, or if they cut it out or not, right? So, you know, sometimes they say, oh, so-and-so's car goes off the cliff and goes into the water. You know, when they're running along with the runtime, they can go, what do we need to chop out here?
Right.
Does that sequence advance the story forward? No, then. But if it does, I mean, I think I've been fortunate so far. I don't make these decisions, but I've been fortunate so far with the films that I've worked on, that my work has not been edited out of it. So, and I like what they did in Old, and that they did the sequence, and then they went back to another scene, and then they went back to it again. I like the way they did that. But
I tell you, the beauty of editors and cinematographers working hand in hand and having that same mindset of, oh, well, and also directors and everything else. But I think there's something special about understanding the concept of editing and the purpose of editing when you are a cinematographer.
Correct. Yeah, knowing where the cut point's going to be. I mean, you're not trying to direct the film, but you're saying, you know, this is what he's going to use. This is what he's not going to use. This is the important part to get. And that also breaks down when we've got a lot of shots to do. And it's like, okay, what is the most important of these shots? Okay, we have 10 shots where we have to show this. The rest of the stuff is gravy that they could, you know, slice or insert here and there, but you need to concentrate on the important parts. And also within that, the talent, if they're not comfortable in the water, you could base all your shots around that and go, we can get one take out of them and they could be uncomfortable. It's happened several times, but you know, there's other performers. You know, one thing to remember when you're watching a sequence like that, it's either Jungle Cruise or Old or Tully with Charlize Theron. It's they have to act while they're underwater as well. They're not just, you know, a lot of okay, well, go underwater and be scared. It's like, well, it doesn't require much acting. I am terrified right now. I'm inside this car and I can't get out. But Charlize is actually able to know what side of the camera to look at. She knows where the lens is and what to do with it. And she's amongst a select few of very, very good performers who can really pull it off underwater and are a pleasure to work with. And she gets it, right? So.
Yeah, she is amazing in pretty much anything she does. I had a chance to interview her for Bombshell, and she's just prolific and so versatile. And I'm glad to hear that you're saying that's the way she is. She's just that good. Yeah. And
Ryan Reynolds was he had the longest breath hold of anybody I've worked with so far. He was fantastic on Deadpool 2.
Okay.
We also did a sequence which ended up not being in the film. I think they reshot it because we did the whole scene underwater with Marina Baccarin. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right, but she played Reynolds' girlfriend, wife in the film.
Right.
And she had, documented huge fears and phobias of water, and we got her comfortable. I mean, that's part of my job description, is to make sure that the talent is comfortable. You know, and there's been certain circumstances where, you know, when we did Glass with M. Night Shyamalan and Bruce Willis, he didn't really have a lot of interest in going in the water. And it wasn't until it's a slow, make him feel confident and comfortable, and it's all about the comfort and make it easy for them, and don't make them, oh my God, I have to dive down from what and do what, and it's like, it's too many things for them to think about, including acting. So it's, part of your job, I think, is to make them feel comfortable, and for you to do all the work, and for them to just concentrate on their acting. So that's a major part of it.
Well, and you did Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol as well, and you were talking about Ryan Reynolds doing that, the longest holding of your breath. And I know that Tom Cruise loves to do all of his stuff. So any thoughts about that particular film, Ghost Protocol?
Ghost Protocol, he and Renner were both in that car that upturned, and Tom is fantastic in the water. I haven't worked. That was the first time that I've worked with him. And, Pete Romano has been with him on a lot of his productions, from The Mummy to the other Mission Impossible picture, the one where he's in that centrifuge. And, Tom wants to do it all. He's capable of doing it. And that's, so, we rehearsed that shot with stunt doubles for about 6 hours. And then he came up and watched on the monitor what we had been doing. And then you could see what he was reblocking the whole thing to how he would do it.
Wow.
So, and then he dove in and he said, hey, underwater camera guy, I'm going to do this, reach for that, do that. And then I go grab Renner. Okay, let's roll. So you had to just like shoot it one take and not screw it up. So again, that's challenging. And, he raises the bar, It's like a lot of people, when you work with them, like M. Night is very, very specific about the shots that he wants. Yeah. And he'll make you do it, 15 times over until he gets what he wants. Even if it's something that's slightly subtle, he'll still want to make it perfect for him. it's not that it's not perfect, it's perfect for him. And that's the same with any director, right? Some of them aren't as specific, but you know, I think it also drives you just to, okay, what can I do to improve that 2% more, that it's not, you know, it's not fulfilling what you really want.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, and again, that's part of your job, is to fulfill what they want. So,
Right.
you know.
Right. To put yourself into it, but at the same time to deliver
Correct.
what they want
Yeah.
with your touch, with your trademark, whatever that
Correct.
happens to be. Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you, Ian Seabrook, taking the time to talk with us about movies and about your work. Thinking back over the body of your work again, it's just so vast. Are there any lasting memories you want to make sure you share with an audience that from a film, good or bad or ugly?
Well, the bad would be, there's a picture idea called Pathfinder. It's like Vikings and Native Indians. It was directed by Marcus Nispel, who is a music video director from, I think he's in Austria. He did the Texas Chainsaw reboots and stuff. Anyway, it was a you know, sword slugfest movie, but there's a bit where there's an ice lake and it cracks open and everyone falls in, and there's a battle underneath there. And we had so many stunt people in armor. Well, it was obviously fake armor and stuff, but chainmail and thick, you know, bearskin rugs and this and that, and because it's supposed to be in the you know, like sort of Game of Thrones-esque sort of Arctic battle thing. And Carl Urban was the actor in that film, and the film is, you know, it's terrible, but that sequence was great, and the work that we did on it was great. And as far as the good is concerned, I would say that when we went to Bora Bora on Batman versus Superman, not only was the location, because I do really have a love affair with the South Pacific, but the sequence where they discovered the kryptonite rock was, we used the performer was a 14-year-old boy from Tahiti, and he's actually professional, semi-professional surfer who had done a lot of surfing at Chopo, which is the giant wave they have there. It breaks onto a very small, shallow reef. We did so many takes with him and his ability to hold his breath and act. And he's not an actor; he's just a, you know, he's a surfer. But he was absolutely the right choice. I mean, there's 80 different angles with it that they only used 2 or 3 of them in the film, but. You know, I followed him down the anchor chain. You know, I started here, and you know, all this stuff, and it was just like Zack said, okay, here's what we have to get. Now dress it up and do it with whatever you want to add to it. And that's usually when that's when I like to shine, is making sure that we have the shot that you require.
Yeah.
But then they go, okay, now give me what you want to give them, and then they go, oh, then from there, then their creative energy starts. Right. You know, colliding with mine. So it's not just a question of pointing the camera at the person. It's just like, as you were saying, like what else are you gonna bring to the project, right? So yeah. And depending on the people that you're working with, I mean, I always bring my best, but when you really start to, you know, connect with someone in that regard, and I have that with Francis Lawrence as well, and Miguel Sapochnik, who there's a picture called Finch that I think Apple is releasing in October with Tom Hanks. I connected really well with Miguel. Who's doing the Game of Thrones. He did the Game of Thrones for several years, and he asked me to do the prequel with them in the UK, but I had sadly I had other commitments. Yeah. But anyway, so it's like that creative, you know, when I was saying earlier, like, you know, Zack and Francis Lawrence and Miguel, and there's a few others, just very select few people that I would, you know, anytime they're calling, you're like, I'm going, you know, Knight is amongst those people. Fantastic person. So it's like, yeah. Would you like to come? Yeah, of course. As long as you're there, it's great. You know.
Yeah. Well, that's another beautiful thing when you're able to develop those relationships and the chemistry that you can develop between, especially a director and a cinematographer. It has to be of one mind in so many different ways. And so you're right. Yeah. When you get those calls of those that you have enjoyed working with, and those that are at, you know, the beyond the height of their talent, and they just keep getting better in certain ways, you can't not say yes. Yeah,
you'll adjust your schedule to make it work. Right?
Absolutely. So, well, Ian, how can people find out more about you if they want to follow your work and follow what's going on with you?
I have like everyone, I have a website. It's dorsalfin.net, and dorsal like the fin on the whales or sharks. My Instagram handle is dorsalfinprod, The dorsal fin was already taken, so I had to go with prod for productions. And then I have another, I also have a linked site on my website just for my second unit land-based cinematography work.
Awesome. Well, Ian, thanks so much for being our guest. I really appreciate it. Any final thoughts or comments you want to share before we wrap things up?
No, it's odd that I had 2 films that I worked on that were released within a week of each other.
Yeah.
I was driving on the 405 down in LA, and I saw at night, my wife goes, "Look, Jungle Cruise," and I looked over and I saw the billboard lit up, and then right behind it was Old, and I go, that never happens, right? It's like, you know, it's just because of the backlog from COVID. I'm sure that's the reason why it all happened that way. And the Bond film, same thing. I think they were the first to push, but and you know, the Thai Cave Rescue picture, when that comes out, I think that's going to be it's a spectacular story. And we worked with the actual divers who did the rescue. Wow. And it was really important for them to have their own equipment, because a lot of their gear is all custom made, and they're all wonderful gentlemen, wonderful human beings. The story was amazing, and also when I was over in the UK, I had the opportunity to be in charge of hiring the crew, and so I chose people who, you know, had experience like me, who had worked their way up. And you know, my focus filler had done a lot of Bond movies, and he'd done Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile in 65mm film. So he's extremely experienced. And Underwater Gaffer had done, you know, a lot of underwater pictures there. So they were amazing crew, as I knew they would be. My dad was from the UK, so you know, I've lived there for a bit and lived in Australia, so it's all in the blood. So it was an instant connection. So again, you know, the experiences of the films that you work on, whether the films are good or not, the experiences tend to be what I remember the most. It's you know, had a fantastic time on that film, and the film was like, it wasn't very well received. You're like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so
exactly. That doesn't take away from the memory. So.
No, there is a certain community and family that you create with those you work with, and the next time you bump into them, whether it's 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 10 films down the road, you're like, hey, you know, then you can reminisce about those times. So yeah, absolutely.
We were there. Yeah, exactly.
Ian, thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to continuing to follow your work, and really appreciate your time. Would love to have you back at some point.
Wonderful to talk to you. Thanks very much for having me on the show.
I'd like to thank Ian Seabrook for taking the time to spend it with us right here on Open Dialogue. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I have. It was amazing to talk to him about all the filmmakers that he's been able to work with, and the body of work that he's created and continuing to create. You can check him out online, check out his website. You can also check him out on IMDb and just see some the amazing work we didn't even cover that's right there as well. If you're looking for some of his new work, you can check out 2 films in theaters right now. Those films, Jungle Cruise, Old. You can also check out Army of the Dead, Zack Snyder film, and in the not too distant future, you'll be able to see his work in the film Finch with Tom Hanks. For Open Dialogue, thanks again for spending time with us. And Ian Seabrook, thank you. Till next time, that's a wrap.